They informed me the trip was canceled. Then I saw their grins from a Maui beach. No warning, no explanation, just a sun-drenched photo on Evan's Instagram captioned, "Best family vacation ever." They were all there, Karen in her blue sun hat, Greg with a cocktail featuring a tiny umbrella, Evan and Lucy throwing peace signs in the surf. I sat at my kitchen table, staring at the screen, the taste of cold tea on my tongue, a blueberry scone untouched on my plate. Just 2 weeks ago, Karen had told me the trip was called off. "Too much happening at work, Mom. Greg's firm is restructuring, and I can't take any time off either. We're just going to do something local this year. Maybe a barbecue," she said, with a smile, through the phone. I smiled back, though my chest had already tightened. I had been looking forward to it for months. Not for Hawaii. I had seen plenty of beaches in my younger days, but for the feeling of being included, for mattering enough to be considered. I hadn't even asked to come. That's what hurt. It was Karen who mentioned it back in March. "We'll all go. A big family thing. You'll love Maui, Mom. You and Lucy can enjoy spa days, while the rest of us surf." I remember blinking at the screen when she told me, on a plane in a swimsuit. It sounded both ridiculous and wonderful. I began walking more, trying to prepare my legs for travel. I bought a new sun hat, navy with a little white ribbon, just in case. Then, the cancellation, polite, hurried, and final. But now here they were, halfway around the world, with drinks, leis, and smiles that didn't seem to miss me at all. I zoomed in on the photo behind Evan's shoulder. I could see the curve of the resort's infinity pool, the one Karen had once shown me on a hotel website, saying, "You'll love the view, Mom. You can see the sunset from the water." I had envisioned it multiple times since I leaned back in my chair with the photo glowing on the screen. The ocean's blue appeared so vivid, it seemed unreal. I shut the laptop, wondering if Evan had posted it by accident or if they planned to tell me. Maybe it wasn't as it seemed, but it was. I didn't call anyone or cry at first. Instead, I sat there, listening to the clock ticking on the kitchen wall. It had belonged to George when he timed Sunday roasts and checked the garden hose. But now it ticked for me. By evening, I discovered more photos. Karen, holding a plate of shrimp with flowers around her neck. Lucy in a beach hammock with a book I had given her. Greg at the bar, smiling too broadly. My entire family on vacation, except for me. They hadn't forgotten or run out of tickets or thought I couldn't handle it. They simply didn't want me there. That's what finally brought tears, slow, hot, and silent. I wiped them with the back of my hand, feeling embarrassed, though no one was watching. The pain wasn't just about the trip. It was older, deeper, harder to identify. I had suppressed it for years, every time Karen claimed she was too busy to visit. Every time Greg sighed when I struggled with the iPad. Every time Lucy texted instead of calling. Now it had a face, a warm, smiling, sun-tanned face, and I had a choice. The next morning, I didn't watch the news, bake scones, or engage in the small, quiet activities that filled my days. I opened the hallway file cabinet, the one George had labeled important in his neat block handwriting, and pulled out every envelope with my name and a $sign. If they could lie to me this easily and completely, what else had I ignored? I intended to find out. I didn't sleep that night, not from rage, as that's not my nature, but from something heavier. I lay in bed with the fan whirring above me, and the neighbor's dog barking twice around midnight, my mind running in quiet, steady circles. Karen's smile in the picture and Greg's relaxed demeanor with his feet in the sand caught my eye. Lucy, with the white strap of her bikini visible and a book in her hand, the very copy of Pride and Prejudice I'd wrapped for her last Christmas, hadn't just gone without me. They'd taken the best parts of me with them. The love I poured into books, recipes, and sunscreen reminders was left behind. By morning, I'd made coffee, but forgot to drink it, while the kitchen carried the scent of toast I hadn't made. My fingers trembled slightly as I reopened Evan's Instagram, not to look at the beach, but to see what else I'd missed. There were more posts now, a short video of Karen and Lucy doing a silly hula dance at a luau, a picture of Greg with a ridiculous straw hat and a beer, and an image of a hotel breakfast with papaya pancakes and a mint sprig, all dated yesterday, all tagged with Maui bliss. The comments were worse than the photos. You guys look amazing. So glad you finally got away. And where's Grandma Betty? That last one hurt, likely from one of Lucy's school friends, with no replies, just sitting like an open wound in the comment section. I closed the app. At 11, the mail arrived, and I shuffled to the door in my usual slippers and cardigan, my breath short from the walk. There was a flyer for patio furniture, a water bill, and a letter from my bank. Nothing new, nothing comforting.
I sat at the table, staring at the drawer where I kept receipts, paperwork, and records of everything I'd ever done for the family. It wasn't tidy, cluttered with half-sorted manila folders, envelopes, and a few handwritten notes, with amounts circled in red ink. My shorthand for loans never repaid. I pulled it open, finding the receipt for Lucy's summer camp 2 years ago. $250 paid with my visa. Karen had called me crying that week. Mom, I hate to ask, but she's been looking forward to this for months. And I'd agreed before she finished. Adjacent to Greg's dental bill of $900, I recalled his words. It's temporary, Betty, just until the bonus arrives. The bonus must have come, as he soon bought a new fishing kayak. Following that were records of a bank transfer for Evan's freshman dorm deposit, Lucy's ballet lessons, and Karen's ailing Subaru needing a bit of help to last through the year. I continued through pages filled with amounts, dates, and brief justifications scribbled alongside them. Karen would pay next month. Greg vowed to return Lucy's call as she deserved the trip. By the end, I had tallied over $38,000, excluding grocery bags, babysitting hours, or unacknowledged birthday checks. For a moment, I wondered if I had been naive. But naive was too gentle a term. I had been taken advantage of, softened over the years, like stale bread, easy to consume and forget. I closed the folder, stood slowly, with aching knees, and walked to the phone. I didn't call Karen or Greg. I contacted my bank. The woman was efficient yet courteous. Yes, Mrs. Manners, I can help you alter automatic transfers. Would you like to stop the monthly deposit to KJ Miller, account ending in 92241? Yes, I replied. And the one to GL Miller as well. I've made those changes. Anything else? She asked. Yes, I murmured. Could you help me open a new savings account solely in my name? Of course, she replied. I wrote down the account number in my neat script and placed it in the drawer atop receipts and broken promises.
They went to Hawaii without me, but that would be the last thing they took. Betrayal doesn't shout or announce itself with fanfare. It settles quietly, like dust on old furniture, slow, silent, and suddenly everywhere. I noticed it more in the small things that day. The quiet hum of the refrigerator, the half-wilted flowers in the vase on the counter, the way my house felt empty, devoid not just of people, but of purpose. I stopped crying. I had already cried the kind of tears that leave a dull pain behind your eyes. Now I was motionless, like a clock without a battery. But being still has its advantages. It allows for clarity. I saw more clearly than ever that I had become an afterthought, a background element in their lives, useful only when needed, invisible otherwise. Around noon, I decided to take a walk. Not far, just to the park 4 blocks away. I used to walk there with Evan when he was young. He liked to collect leaves and pretend they were secret messages from the trees. I always played along. That boy had a vivid imagination. The bench by the pond was still there, though a bit more rusted than I remembered. I sat down, ignoring the pain in my knees. Across the water, 2 young mothers pushed strollers, and a man jogged by with his dog. Life kept going. I thought about calling Karen, not to argue, as I never raised my voice, but maybe to hear some truth. Then I imagined her voice, rushed, apologetic, full of explanations that wouldn't matter. It was Greg's idea, Mom, or worse, we didn't think you'd want to come, as if being 78 means I no longer have desires. Instead, I went home. The mail brought nothing new, a catalog, a reminder for a dental appointment left on the counter. I poured myself some water, no ice. My teeth don't tolerate it anymore. That evening, as the light began to dim, I received a text from Lucy. Hi, Grandma. Hawaii is amazing. Just wanted to say hi. Miss you. I stared at the screen for a long time. Did she miss me? Or was it just a phrase thrown in like sprinkles on a cake? I typed back slowly, hope you're having a good time. Love you too. I didn't ask why I wasn't there or who decided to exclude me, because I already knew. The next day, I took out the blue binder labeled legal. It was George's idea back when his hands began to tremble, and we both realized that time wasn't something you could negotiate with. The binder contained our wills, the house deed, insurance documents, and a copy of the durable power of attorney granting Karen control over my finances in case anything happened to me. I stared at that document for a long time before contacting my lawyer. Miriam still had the same firm handshake and wore the same silver bangles on her wrist. She didn't question my reasons for wanting changes. She simply listened as I calmly explained my discomfort with the current arrangement. I expressed my desire to revoke the power of attorney. Miriam nodded, acknowledging my rights. Should we draft a new one? She asked. No, not for now, I replied. She glanced at me and the will. I hesitated, then pulled a note from my purse that I'd written that morning, listing just 4 names, 1 circled. Yes, I want to make some changes, I said. Miriam didn't probe. She understood. She had been present when George signed the original document, aware of the family dynamics. As I left her office, the air felt lighter, as if I had shed something invisible. On the drive home, I passed the florist, where Karen once worked, recalling the Mother's Day bouquet she sent last year with a note. Thanks for everything, Mom. Couldn't do life without you. Though she could manage a trip to Hawaii without me. I turned into my driveway, the porch light flickering as usual, the step creaking, and the wind chimes George hung 20 years ago still responding to the breeze. I lingered for a moment before entering, letting the wind and chimes signal change, my change. That evening, I sat at the dining table and opened the yellow notebook I kept hidden behind the cookbooks no one asked for anymore. It was a simple spiral-bound pad I'd picked up from a pharmacy, originally intended for recipes, but it had transformed into something else entirely. A quiet record of everything I'd given, lent, or endorsed, page by page, with neat columns in my handwriting. Handwritten note, date, amount, purpose. October 2011, $500, down payment for Lucy's braces. May 2013, $2,000, emergency car repairs for Greg August. 2016, $1,400, Karen's rent shortfall due to job change. December 2017, $200, Christmas gifts when Greg's bonus didn't arrive. April 2019, $900, Lucy's college deposit, promised repayment by summer. Each entry was followed by silence. No repayments, no discussions, just more pleas. It began innocently with a little help here, a small loan there, and every time I agreed, not because I expected repayment, but because I craved being needed. It was their only reason to approach me. Deep down, I understood this long ago, but I wasn't ready to face it. Now, I turned to the last page and wrote a new entry. August 2025, Hawaii trip. Not financial, but emotional. Felt trivial to note it, yet also truthful, and I had learned to stop apologizing for truth. I replaced the notebook in its hiding spot behind the old books and unused recipes. Then I made tea. The next morning, I contacted Social Security to verify my monthly benefits, enough to feel secure. The woman was friendly. Yes, ma'am, your deposit is set for the 3rd of each month. Do you want a secondary alert? No. Thank you, I said. I just want to know what's mine. It was a simple sentence, but it resonated within me like a bell. I just want to know what's mine. Later, I went to the pharmacy for my medication. The pharmacist, a young man with nervous eyes, used the careful tone reserved for the elderly, as if we might break if addressed too quickly. Mrs.
Manners, your refill is ready. That'll be $147.
I handed him my card, and he glanced at it, frowning. Didn't your daughter usually pick this up? She's on vacation, I replied, smiling just enough to make him unsure of how to respond. I didn't mind. I carried the brown paper bag home with both hands, slowly, step by step. Not because I was tired, but because I wanted to savor each step, the rhythm, the control. Once home, I sat on the porch. The late summer sun was gentle, no longer hot, and the trees rustled above me, the same ones George used to trim every fall. I could almost see him on the ladder, shouting down advice I didn't need. I smiled at the memory. It didn't hurt as much as before. The phone rang just after 5. It was Karen. I stared at the screen for a full 10 seconds before answering. Hi, Mom, she said, her voice overly cheerful. We just got back this morning. I noticed, I replied, calm but not cold, just clear. There was a pause. She hadn't anticipated that. Oh, Evan must have posted something, huh? A little laugh. You know how kids are. He wasn't hiding anything, I said. He's never needed to. Another pause, longer this time. Mom, I meant to call you while we were there. Things just got hectic. Maui must be busy this time of year. Mom, please don't be like that. Like what? I asked, still calm, like someone who found out she wasn't invited after buying sunscreen just in case. I could hear her sharp inhale, then the voice I knew too well, the one that wore guilt like perfume, but never truly absorbed it. It wasn't that we didn't want you there. It just seemed like a lot, with the flight and the walking. We thought it might be too much. I see, I said. You decided what I could handle. Mom, please, no need to explain, I said. I understand perfectly now. For the first time in years, I truly meant it. She mumbled a few more words, part excuses, part apologies, but I let them slide by. I was done seeking sincerity in shallow waters. When we hung up, I didn't feel victorious. I felt still, a stillness born from resolve, not weakness. Let them scramble. Let them wonder how far I'd go. I wasn't going anywhere. I was already home. The following Monday, I visited my bank branch for the first time in over a year. I could have called or done everything online, but I wanted someone to look me in the eye when I spoke. I needed to remind myself that I existed in the real world, not just as a number or a background figure in others' lives. The young man at the front desk, probably no older than 30, smiled as I approached. Good morning, ma'am. Can I help you? Yes, I replied. I need to review my accounts and speak to a manager. His smile wavered slightly, but he nodded. Absolutely. Let me see who's available. They placed me in a small office with glass walls and soft music emanating from a ceiling speaker. It was likely meant to feel secure, yet to me, it felt like I was on display. The elderly woman in her neat blouse and handbag, handling some significant financial task, as if she were still in charge of anything. The manager entered, a woman this time, probably around my daughter's age, but with a firmer handshake. She said, Manners. I'd like to update the beneficiaries on my accounts, I stated. She blinked once, then reached for a folder. Of course. Do you have the names? I do, I replied, handing her a folded piece of paper. She opened it, read it, then looked up at me. No Greg? No Karen? No, I confirmed. She didn't inquire further, just started typing. And you'd like to assign only your granddaughter, Lucy? That's right, and I'd like to attach a note. Can you do that? She hesitated. We can attach a personal message for internal records, but it won't be legally binding. That's fine. I just want something written down. She nodded, opened a document, and asked, What do you want it to say? Without hesitation, I replied, Lucy, this is for all the times you showed up and for everything you never requested. Clara typed it out, her eyes lingering on the screen for a moment before she turned it around for me to see. I nodded, and before leaving, I requested the cancellation of the joint access that Karen had established years ago, the one that allowed her to transfer money in emergencies. Clara didn't flinch and managed it efficiently and professionally, but as I signed the form, I noticed a change in her expression, a hint of respect or recognition perhaps. At home, I boiled an egg and made toast, eating slowly and thoughtfully. I reflected on how I'd spent the last 2 decades describing what I did as help and what they did as being busy. That afternoon, the phone rang from an unfamiliar number, but I answered anyway. "Hi, Grandma." It was Lucy. "Hello, sweetheart," I replied. There was a pause, followed by a quieter voice. "I think I messed up." "What do you mean?" I asked. "I knew about the trip. I mean, I didn't know they weren't inviting you. I just assumed." "Assumed what?" "That you said no, that maybe you didn't feel like going." I listened to her breathe on the other end. "They said it wasn't your type of vacation, that you'd be more comfortable at home." "I see," I said. "But then Evan told me what you said, and it doesn't feel right." It hasn't felt right since we arrived. I didn't respond immediately, then said, "You're not responsible for their decisions, Lucy. You're only accountable for what you choose to do next." Another pause. "I want to come over," she said. "Not now. Just sometime this week, if that's okay." "It's more than okay." She hung up quietly. That evening, I took out my sewing box, not because anything needed mending, but just to feel something familiar in my hands. The weight of scissors, the comfort of old thread. I sat by the window, watching the porch light flicker, letting the silence envelop me, not as loneliness, but as space to choose, to breathe, to finally become more than someone else's afterthought. For the first time in a long while, I wasn't waiting for anyone. That night, I brought out the photo albums, the real ones, not digital, not scrolling and double tapping and pretending fleeting hearts meant anything. Just thick, leather-bound books with plastic sleeves and faded ink in the corners. George had always labeled them meticulously: Florida 82, Easter, Karen age 9, Greg's first promotion. His handwriting exuded a kind of quiet confidence. Square, sure, careful. I traced the letters with my finger. He had always believed in order, in record keeping, in leaving behind something others could understand when you were gone. I flipped through the pages slowly. There we were, on the front porch of our old house, Karen holding a popsicle, barefoot, me in a sundress I'd sewn myself, George behind the camera. I could tell by the way my eyes weren't quite looking at the lens. I was looking at him. I turned another page. Christmases, birthdays, picnics with plastic chairs and foil-wrapped sandwiches, Karen's wedding day, her eyes half glossed with nerves, and me straightening her veil with hands that had packed her lunch 1,000 times. George stood beside her like the proudest man on earth. And then the newer ones, Lucy's kindergarten graduation, Evan in a Halloween costume I made from scratch, photos where I wasn't smiling as widely, though I couldn't explain why, just something in the eyes, the quiet shrinking of presence, the invisible seat being pulled away, one polite smile at a time. The latest album had fewer photos, with more gaps between events, as if my life had become more intermittent. I closed the book and gently placed it on the table. It wasn't exactly sadness I felt, but rather a stark clarity that strikes late but hits hard. Life had continued for everyone else, and somewhere along the way, I had stopped being included in the journey. I reached for the small notebook I kept near the phone, where I jotted down things I didn't want to forget, like doctor appointments, grocery lists, and passwords that always escaped me. I flipped to a blank page and wrote, "I have given, I have waited, I have remained silent. That season has ended." I underlined it once. The next morning, I called Miriam again, saying There was something else I wanted documented. She met me at her office that afternoon with a fresh notepad ready. I want to set up a trust, I told her, not for my estate, but for my freedom. She raised her eyebrows in surprise. I want to completely sever any financial ties to Karen and Greg, legally and entirely. I want to ensure they can't undo what I've changed, neither now nor after I'm gone. Miriam leaned in closer. That's a very serious decision, Betty, she said. I know, I replied, and it's mine to make. By the time we finished drafting the documents, the sun had dipped lower in the sky, casting golden streaks across the windows. As I stood to leave, she looked at me for a long moment and said, "You look taller." I chuckled, maybe blaming the shoes, but it wasn't really them. On my way back, I swung by the grocery store and bought only what I wanted: salmon, sourdough, a small box of strawberries, and a pint of mint chip ice cream. It felt like crafting a love letter to myself through products and aisle numbers. At home, I prepared dinner, set the table for one, and didn't apologize to the vacant chairs. When the phone rang later, I didn't even glance at the screen. I let it buzz and fade away. Not every call needs a response, and not every silence needs filling. Some things are best left undisturbed, like truth, like me sitting at my table, finally enjoying a meal while it's hot. The calls began on Thursday, first from Karen, 2 missed ones in the morning, then a voicemail I ignored. Then Greg called once in the afternoon and again just before dinner. No message, just the number on the screen. Like a knock I didn't want to answer. By Friday morning, there were 5 missed calls between them. I didn't pick up any of them, not out of spite or to punish, but simply because I didn't feel like explaining something that no longer required explanation. They had their opportunity to speak when it mattered, and they chose silence. Now it was my turn. Instead, I cleaned out the pantry, threw away expired cans, donated the good ones I knew I'd never eat, and wiped down shelves I hadn't inspected closely in years. It felt strangely satisfying, like clearing a part of myself. Around noon, the doorbell rang, and I knew it would be Karen. She stood there in a crisp blouse and jeans that appeared deliberately casual, her hair tied back, her face set in that half smile she used when she was nervous, but trying to hide it. "Hi, Mom." I opened the door, but didn't step aside. "I called," she said. "I know," I replied, as she shifted her weight. "Can I come in?" I nodded and moved just enough for her to enter. She walked in like a guest, cautious and quiet, glancing around the living room as if expecting something to have changed. Nothing had, of course. Same couch, same old throw. A blanket draped over the same photo of George on the mantel as she sat with her hands clasped in her lap. "You didn't tell me you were changing the accounts," I said, sitting across from her. "You didn't mention you were going to Maui," I added. Her jaw tightened. "That's different," she replied. "To me it's not," I said, as a tense silence stretched between us. She was the first to break it. "We thought it would be easier, that the flight, the walking, and the heat might be too much for you." "You thought," I repeated. She sighed. "We weren't trying to hurt you. We just didn't think you'd notice." "I made a mistake," she admitted. "You made a choice," I replied. "There's a distinction." Karen looked down at her hands, her voice softening. "You've always been there, Mom. Always helped. Always said yes. I think I stopped asking if I was being fair. I just took. I'm sorry. I didn't respond immediately. Then I said, I raised you to be kind, to be fair, to consider others. I know, she said, and I didn't do any of that. Another silence followed, this one gentler. I stood, walked to the kitchen, and returned with 2 cups of tea, placing one in front of her. She took it silently. I'm not angry anymore, I said. I was, but I'm not now. She nodded, her eyes glazed. I'm not going to act like it didn't happen or revert to how things used to be. I won't be your safety net anymore, your fallback, your unseen support. I understand, though I'm not sure you do, but I hope you will. She blinked rapidly and looked up at me. I miss you, she said. I miss the version of you that noticed me. We sat in silence for a while, our tea growing cold. When she stood to leave, she hugged me. I didn't pull back, but I didn't lean in either. It was a hug between people who once knew each other well. As I closed the door behind her, I felt tired, but not depleted. Boundaries aren't walls. They're doors you choose when to open or keep shut. Greg arrived the next day, not with flowers or an apology, but with questions. He didn't call first, just showed up around 3 p.m., as if his presence alone would resolve everything. He wore the same athletic jacket he always wore to barbecues, like he might head to a golf course at any moment. I saw him through the window and considered not answering the door, but I did. He stood on the porch, arms crossed. Hey, Betty, he said. I didn't reply. Can we talk? I stepped aside, but didn't offer him a seat. He entered the living room and glanced around, as if checking for damage. Karen must have told him everything. He turned to me. Look, I don't know what's happening, but we're all confused. Karen mentioned you changed some financial things. I nodded. He exhaled through his nose. Okay, that's your right, of course. But we're just wondering what this is really about. I raised an eyebrow. You went on vacation, I said. You left me out. You lied. He raised a hand. We didn't lie. We didn't include you. That's a distinction you should be cautious about, I said. Especially in a house built on things you didn't pay for. His eyes narrowed. Are you saying this is about money? No, it's about value, I replied. Greg sat down, uninvited, spreading his legs wide. Elbows resting on knees, the posture of someone accustomed to being heard. Betty, listen, we're all a bit exhausted. It's been a tough year. Karen's job is stressful, and I've got the business and the kids to manage. You don't need to list your burdens, I said. I know them. I've paid for half. He blinked. I'm not angry anymore, Greg. I'm just done pretending I owe you anything. That's not how families operate. No, I replied, but that is how dignity operates. He stood up slowly. You know, Karen's really upset. She feels terrible. Then she can learn from that feeling. This whole thing isn't like you, he said. No, I answered, but maybe you never really knew me. He frowned, glanced at the mantel at George's photo. He wouldn't have liked this. I stepped closer. George would never have left me behind. Greg didn't respond. As he reached the door, he turned. So what now? You just cut everyone off? No, I said. I stopped being a silent investor in a family that won't even save me a seat at the table. He seemed like he wanted to say more, but didn't. When the door closed behind him, I felt no triumph, just air, clear and still. I made a sandwich and watched the late light settle across the floor like a promise. For the first time in years, I didn't worry about who might be upset with me next. Lucy came over on Sunday. She didn't knock, just texted, "I'm on the porch. Is it okay?" I opened the door, and there she was, sitting on the steps with her knees pulled up, wearing an oversized hoodie and worn-out sneakers. Her hair was untidy in a way I'd never seen before. Not styled messy, just genuinely unkempt. I stepped aside. "Come in." She entered slowly, like someone trying to determine if they were still welcome. I didn't rush her. Some things need to be done at one's own pace. She stood in the middle of the living room, looking around, then at me. "I'm sorry," she said. "For what?" "For assuming you didn't matter." I didn't expect her to say that, not in that way. She sat down, curling one leg beneath herself. "They told me it would be too much." For you, the journey was unquestioned. I simply followed along, eating pineapple by the pool and capturing photos of sunsets. You never asked why, but I did once. I questioned why you weren't joining us, and Mom said you needed rest, that you'd be happier at home. I accepted it because it was easier than suspecting deceit. Sitting across from her, I expressed my pain. What hurts most is realizing no one thought I might be the kind of woman who'd want to experience a sunset from a new place, who still longed to belong. She looked down and said, "I do see you." I believed her, not just because I wanted to, but because her expression remained unchanged when she said it. "I made you something," she added, reaching into her tote bag. She pulled out a small photo album with a handmade cardboard cover, wrapped in fabric and stitched along the spine. She handed it to me. Inside were photos from the trip, but not the ones I'd seen online. These were more intimate. Lucy, reading on the balcony, a page caught in the wind. Greg and Karen, asleep in lounge chairs, unaware. A seashell with my name written on it. I turned the pages slowly. On the last page was a note in blue ink. "This is what I should have shared with you the first time. I want to do better." I closed the album and looked at her. "Thank you." We sat in silence, not awkward, but the kind that allowed space to breathe. "Can I come next Sunday?" she asked, "just to hang out?" "You don't have to ask," I replied. "You just have to come." She smiled, a smile that didn't reach her mouth but settled behind her eyes. Later, after she left, I placed the album on the shelf with the others. It didn't match, wasn't labeled in George's handwriting, but it was the first in years that felt like it belonged, and that was enough. Monday arrived with a quiet I hadn't felt in years, not the silence of waiting for a call or footsteps, but the peace of a room that needed nothing from me. I watered the plants and cleaned the windowsills. As I was folding laundry, a task I usually rush through mid-morning, the lawyer called to inform me that the trust documents were ready. "Would you like to come in and sign this week, Mrs. Manners?" he asked. "Yes," I replied. "Let's do tomorrow." After hanging up, I stood still in the kitchen, the phone still warm in my hand. It was really happening. No more shared access, no surprise withdrawals, no invisible hands reaching into what belonged to me. I had allowed myself to be treated like a background utility. But now I was choosing the opposite, not revenge, but recognition. After lunch, I checked the mail, bills, coupons, and a handwritten letter from Greg. It was neatly folded and addressed in his distinctive blocky handwriting, the kind he used on permission slips for the kids. I opened it slowly, ready for the tone. Betty, I know you think I don't care, and that I only appear when things go awry. Maybe you're right, but I want you to know I never intended for you to feel used. We've relied on you more than we should have. I see that now. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I've always respected you, even when I didn't say it. Maybe, especially then. I hope we find our way back. Greg. I read it twice, then folded it again and placed it in the drawer. I wasn't sure if I believed it all, but it was more than I expected. I spent the rest of the day in the garden, pulling weeds and pruning the rose bushes George planted when Karen was born. They were overgrown, wild, and beautiful in a way that defied order. Just before dinner, Lucy texted, Grandma, can I bring something? Cookies or a painting I did of your porch? I smiled and replied, just bring yourself. That's more than enough. I slept well that night, not because everything was resolved, but because I had stopped asking to be noticed. The next morning, I walked into Miriam's office with confidence. She had the documents ready, already clipped and highlighted. Are you sure? She asked. I nodded, then signed my name 3 times. Those strokes of the pen meant I was no longer someone else's silent safety net. In the lobby, I walked past a woman who might have been my age or perhaps older. She had a familiar expression I once carried, polite, cautious, and worn thin by too many unreciprocated favors. Our eyes locked briefly, and though I said nothing, I hoped she saw in me a message. You can say no. You have the right to choose yourself. Having done so myself, I found the sky didn't collapse. It simply expanded a bit more. On Wednesday morning, I brewed coffee and poured it into the fine china. Not for any guest, but because I realized I needed no special occasion to be kind to myself. For years, the porcelain cups had remained untouched, waiting for birthdays, holidays, or guests who seldom lingered. Now, it was just me, and that was a good enough reason. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping slowly, listening to the clock above the stove tick away. George's clock still kept time, accurate twice a day, even when the battery waned. The phone rang. It was Miriam confirming that the revised will was filed. I was all set. I thanked her and ended the call. I had removed Karen and Greg from the inheritance, leaving everything to Lucy, with the condition that she finish school and become self-reliant without using my money to cover their deficits. This wasn't to punish her, but to safeguard her. No one else needed to know, not yet. The doorbell rang in the afternoon. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, Karen was there again, this time holding a small box. I baked something, she said. I glanced at the box, lemon squares, her specialty from when she would visit on weekends. I wasn't sure if you'd answer, she added. I almost hadn't. She offered the box, and I accepted it more out of curiosity than anything else. I want to try again, she said, not just with words. Then stop visiting as if I'm a patient, I replied. Her expression shifted. Is that how it feels? She asked. Sometimes, yes. We sat in the living room with tea and lemon squares. They were good. Though I didn't mention it, Karen looked older to me that day, not just in appearance. In her expression and her silence, the kind that emerges when excuses begin to sound like noise even to the person offering them. She said, "I know I've let you down. I don't know how to make it right." "You don't," I responded. "Some things can't be fixed, but they can be confronted." She nodded. "Greg mentioned he stopped by," she said. "I know," I replied, noticing her gaze drop. "He's worried about the finances." I tilted my head and asked, "And you?" "I'm ashamed, but also relieved that you finally addressed it," she admitted. We didn't discuss the will, the trust, or the savings accounts that no longer bore their names. Some truths are too burdensome for casual conversation. Instead, we spoke about Lucy, how she wanted to change her major, how she disliked the cafeteria food but cherished the quiet of the library. For a brief time, we were just mother and daughter, like before life became complicated with mortgages, favors, and silence. When Karen left, she hugged me more tightly this time. No pretense, just wait, and perhaps the start of something genuine. I carefully washed the china cup, dried it gently, and placed it back on the shelf. Not as a keepsake, but as something that had already fulfilled its purpose. On Thursday, I walked to the old community center 2 blocks away, a place I hadn't visited in years, not since George's memorial, when we rented the back room for coffee and cookies. The faint scent of wood polish and lemon cleaner still lingered. A flyer on the bulletin board caught my attention. Silver Circle, a gathering space for women 65 and older, stories, coffee, real talk, Thursdays at 10. It was 10:07. I hesitated at the door, my hand hovering over the knob, part of me still feeling too much of something. Too old, too new. But the woman who opened the door had silver braids and bright eyes and said, "Come in, hun. We're just getting started." There were 8 of us that day, all women, all older than I once thought women could be and still laugh like that. One brought banana bread, another shared a stack of library books. They welcomed me without hesitation, and we sat in a circle of folding chairs that creaked slightly when someone leaned back. No one asked about my children or who I used to be. They just let me be. We discussed knee pain, recipes, and the absurd price of cucumbers. Then, a woman named Hattie said, "My son hasn't called in 6 weeks. I used to chase it, but now I let the silence speak for itself." Everyone nodded, and so did I. Afterward, we cleaned up together, and I offered to bring something next time. They said, "Just bring yourself." I walked home, feeling lighter, read a book by the window, drank tea, and let the sun stretch across the floor without rushing to meet it. Lucy dropped by in the evening, unannounced, with a knock and her gentle voice. "It's me." She held a painting under her arm, the one she'd mentioned before, my porch, captured in watercolor, with the flower pots, the worn railing, and the light fixture that flickered in the rain. She'd captured every detail perfectly. "It's beautiful," I said. She suggested, "Maybe you could hang it inside for when it's too cold to sit out." I looked at her closely. Her face retained the softness of youth, but her eyes were sharper, more awake. "I'm not cold yet," I said. She laughed. "No, I didn't think so." We brewed tea as she shared stories about her classes, her roommate's fascination with houseplants, and the eccentric professor notorious for wearing mismatched socks. I listened, not as someone being updated, but as someone finally being welcomed in. After she left, I stood for a while in the doorway, clutching the painting to my chest. This life, this peacefully earned and rearranged existence, was beginning to feel like my own, not the life I surrendered, nor the one I waited for others to appreciate, but the one I chose, and that was sufficient. On Friday morning, I received a letter from the law office confirming all filings were complete. The trust was active, and the revised will was on record. Everything was finalized, signed, and witnessed. There was no drama, no gavel slamming, no one storming off, just 2 pages in a beige envelope and a quiet assurance that no one could change this, not Karen, not Greg, not their pleas or promises or theatrics. I prepared a soft-boiled egg, toasted sourdough to my liking, golden never burnt, and ate slowly, savoring each bite. My body was still my own, as were my choices. Around 10, the phone rang. It was Karen again. I let it ring twice and answered on the third. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice uncertain. "Are you free for lunch?" I paused. "Just tea, in my kitchen, noon." When she arrived, she brought flowers, the kind I used to love. Tulips in orange and red, like tiny flames. She placed them on the table, as if offering a peace token. "I thought we could talk," she offered. "I thought we already had." She nodded nervously, smoothing her sleeve's edge. "I talked to Greg," she said. "He's angry. That's his choice. And confused. That's also his." She swallowed. "I told him I don't blame you, that you're allowed to change your mind about everything." I poured the tea. "I never realized," she continued, "how much of your life was centered around us." "It was never about realizing," I replied. "It was about noticing." She looked down at her cup. "I think I got used to you being the one who would never say no." "That was your mistake," I said softly, "and mine was letting you believe it would last indefinitely." She remained silent, as did I, until she eventually asked, "Is it too late?" "Too late for what?" "To be important again, but in a different way this time." I took a deep breath and allowed it to linger between us. "It's never too late," I replied, "but it's not automatic. You can't bypass the effort." "I understand," Karen said, blinking rapidly and nodding. "You won't be punished," I added, "but you also won't be prioritized anymore. That's the difference, and it's what you've earned. I hope someday you'll truly feel it," she said. She stood up slowly. "Thank you for the tea and for not calling this a talk." After she left, I gazed at the flowers for a long time. They were beautiful, but I didn't place them at the center of the table. Instead, I set them near the back window where the late afternoon light shines. Something beautiful, visible, but no longer the centerpiece. That evening, Lucy called. "Mom's quiet tonight," she remarked. "She's reflecting." "Are you okay?" I replied, "I'm better than okay. I'm free." Lucy was quiet for a moment before she whispered, "Good." After we hung up, I stood in the yard, inhaling the fragrance of freshly cut grass and tulips. There was no turning back, and for the first time, I didn't want to. On Sunday evening, I received a text from Lucy. "Would you come to dinner? Everyone's going to be there."
"I'll sit next to you." I stared at the message for a while. My initial reaction was to decline. I didn't want to show strained small talk, forced laughter, or apologies that served as more of a relief than true remorse. But since it was Lucy asking, I replied, "Yes, I'll bring dessert."
I arrived shortly after 6, and Greg opened the door without a word, stepping aside with a neutral expression, neither angry nor warm. Karen lingered behind him, smoothing her blouse and glancing around. The dining table was set for 6. Evan greeted me with a gentle hug, and Lucy pulled out the chair next to hers, the one with the best light and the best view of the backyard, where a string of lights still hung from their last celebration. I idly wondered if they had noticed how long those lights had been there. Dinner was roast chicken, slightly overcooked, for which Karen apologized. I reassured her it was fine. Our conversation drifted from Evan's new internship to Lucy's favorite class and something about Greg's office downsizing. I offered no advice or solutions, merely listened and nodded occasionally. It wasn't tense, nor was it warm. It simply was. Midway through the meal, Karen cleared her throat. "I know this doesn't fix anything," she said, "but thank you for coming, for giving us the chance to do better." Greg remained silent, cutting his meat. "I didn't come for you," I said. "I came for Lucy and for myself." Karen looked down. "Still, thank you." We moved on, passing the green beans, and Evan refilled water glasses. Someone briefly laughed at an old story from a beach trip years ago, not the most recent one. After a dessert of cobbler I made from scratch, I stood to leave. Lucy followed me to the door, her coat already over her arm. Can I walk you home?" she asked. "You don't need to," I replied. "I know," she said, "but I want to." The walk was silent, with only the sound of gravel under our shoes and the low hum of porch lights flicking on one by one. "They're trying," she eventually said. "I'm not interested in trying any more," I replied. "I'm interested in truth, time, and being known, not managed." Lucy nodded. "I see you." I stopped walking. "Say that again." She looked at me steadily. "I see you." No one had ever said that to me like this before. Not in 78 years, not even George. I gently touched her cheek. "Don't forget how to do that." "I won't," she promised. At my door, she hugged me, not tightly, just sincerely. When I stepped inside, and when I shut the door, the silence felt secure rather than isolating. They had announced the family trip was off, and they enjoyed a beach without me. Meanwhile, I walked home in the dark, yet I didn't feel lonely. On Monday morning, I awoke before dawn for no particular reason, without an alarm, just a gentle internal prompt suggesting the day might hold something new, even if it wasn't clear what. I made tea and sat by the window. The sky was still dark, but gradually lightening to a soft, deep blue. The birds hadn't begun their songs yet, and the world seemed to be holding its breath. I watched the light return slowly and quietly, with no rush or grand gestures. By 8, I was dressed and opened the small cedar box on my dresser, where I stored items too private for drawers. George's cufflink, a picture of Karen at age 10 with her science fair ribbon, and the first card Lucy ever wrote to me in her uneven handwriting. I added a slip of paper that said, "I see you." I folded it, tucked it between the ribbon and cufflink, and closed the lid. At 9, I headed to the community center. The Silver Circle was busier this time, with new faces, including a woman with bright earrings who mentioned her daughter hadn't spoken to her in 3 years. No one asked why. We simply nodded and made space. When it was my turn to share, I didn't tell the whole story. I simply said, "This year, I remembered I was a person, not just a function." They nodded, and someone reached over to squeeze my hand.
Afterward, Hattie offered me a ride home. but I declined. I wanted to walk, to feel the sun touch my face as it did when I was young and unaware that I would spend decades letting people take pieces of me without asking.
During my walk, I passed by the house with the blue door, where a boy was sitting on the steps, drawing on the concrete with chalk. He glanced up and smiled, and that simple gesture was enough. Upon returning home, I watered the plants, picked up the book I'd been reading, and allowed myself a 20-minute nap in a sunny spot on the floor. There were no calls that day, no new apologies, and I found I didn't need them. I had my porch, my name, my choices, and my life, which I had redefined, reclaimed, and re-entered. If you've read this far, perhaps you've experienced something similar, being invisible, useful, dismissed in subtle ways that leave deep emotional scars. Maybe no one took you to Hawaii, but perhaps you can take yourself to a better place. Even if it starts with something small, like enjoying a cup of tea in your finest china, going for a walk in shoes you selected, or finding a quiet moment where your own thoughts are the loudest. If this story resonated with you, share it, leave a comment, or simply sit still and let it resonate within you. That, too, is a form of triumph.